Hey YouTube, how you guys doing? My name is Kyle, you know me as Dragonmar, and welcome to a new video. Today guys, we're going to be going over the most common mistakes at every rank in Valorant. Now this video is going to go over all of the most common mistakes that I've seen while playing the game, as well as some of the ways that you can fix them. I hope you guys enjoy. And as always guys, so many of you are watching nowadays, but a lot of you still aren't subscribed. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. Starting things off, one of the most common mistakes I've seen, particularly at the lower ranks, is staring at the ground too often. So staring at the ground has a lot to do with crosshair placement, but also a lot to do with movement. A lot of the times you see this when you are newer to the game, your crosshair tends to sort of aim towards the ground as you're moving to help you move throughout the map. This gets better over time. This is just one of those things where you need to focus on learning the maps, learning the game, and then from that point forward, it all becomes a little more clear. The easiest way to fix this, obviously, is to take the time to really get to know these maps inside and out, and to focus more on your crosshair placement. So if you know someone's behind a corner, raise that crosshair up. Make sure it's at head level before you peek it, and that's one of the easiest ways to stop staring at the ground. And another huge mistake that you often see towards the lower ranks is when people use abilities in the wide open. So this is really bad, and I see this a lot with smokes and with flashes. A lot of the times what happens is players will know it's a good time to use their abilities, but they will be in a very poor position when they do it. For example, in the wide open. When you're using abilities, particularly ones that are going to help you engage with an enemy, make sure you're behind cover before you do it. I'm thinking mainly Phoenix flashes. Just stand behind a wall, flash around it, and go for it. There's no reason for you to constantly be peeking out of that corner with a flash in your hand. You know what I mean? Make sure you have your gun out in those situations. Same with smokes. Just put yourself behind cover really quick, throw your smoke, then peek with your gun out. And up next, we have a universal mistake, something that happens at all ranks, sort of, brings us all together, makes us realize we're all human, is forgetting the bomb. A lot of the times, this does happen more at lower ranks, and hopefully there's enough communication there to remind this person, but this has happened in my Immortal games. This happens all the time. It's really important you understand who has the bomb on your team when you're attacking, and also if you're the bomb carrier, make sure you're not gonna die in a position where the bomb is unretrievable, or make sure if your team is clearing a site, you're not on the other side of the map. Things like that. So it's really important at the start of each round, take those like 3 or 4 seconds, figure out who has the bomb, and then work your way from there. And that should save you a ton of bad rounds. Unfortunately though, I don't know if this can ever fully be fixed. And now we move to one of my personal favorites, grouping up and not pushing. This is something you see a lot towards the middle ranks, so I'm thinking anywhere from like silver probably to plat. What happens in these ranks is that players understand they need to be together to work as a team, but no one is willing to sort of make the first push or make the initial move. No one is willing to put themselves in that situation where they may die first. And because of that, what ends up happening is you just have your whole team clumped up together, waiting to just get like ulted or pushed from all different sides. It's really, really important that when you are sort of in this position, or if you're finding this happens in a lot of your games, maybe it's time for you to start being one of the initiators. Maybe it's time for you to be an entry fragger and actually start, starting these rounds off for your team. I do it with Brimstone even, right? I don't even care. I just throw my smokes down and I'm like, all right guys, let's go, follow me in. Sometimes that's all it takes. So, grouping up in mid, not always a good idea. Make sure you're pushing. And up next, we have something that definitely plagues the lowest ranks. I'm talking, bronze, maybe even like iron, the wood league ranks. No, but this one really is bad. It's walking while shooting, but more importantly, it's really just running and moving while shooting. Obviously, you can walk shoot in this game. What I was seeing a lot when I was leveling up a second account to play with my girlfriend was that people in those ranks really don't understand you have to stand still, including my girlfriend. I had to teach her that, obviously. They just don't understand. They're coming from different games, and they're so used to like Call of Duty and things like that. It's really, really, really easy to fix. One of the quickest ways to fix this is with crouching. It's not like an end-all be-all sort of solution, but it is a really good way to sort of get it under control in the meantime, is to just crouch when you start shooting. Really, really important to learn counter-strafing as well. That'll help solve this problem. But once again, this is just one of those mistakes you see very early on in someone's development in a game like Valorant, and they'll eventually work their way out of it. And now something that I see all the time. So this is definitely in those mid to high ranks. This is force buying too often. Now you might be thinking, right, force buying isn't always bad. You'd be right, it's not always bad. But what ends up happening is either someone tilts or someone thinks they're better than they are, and they'll constantly start force buying. Now, once or twice isn't the end of the world, but if they're doing it every round, most likely what's happening is not only is your team losing rounds, hence the reason you need to force, but they're also screwing up the overall economy of your team. Maybe people have to constantly buy them, maybe people are missing abilities to sort of help them. What ends up happening when you force buy is you put your team at a huge disadvantage, especially if you don't come out on top in that next round. So if you do it too often, it's actually like one of the worst things you can do to your team, and it can really snowball the game into sort of an unwinnable situation. When the enemy team is stacked up on 9k and you're force buying every round, you're in a tough spot. So the easiest way to fix this is to, if your teammate's doing it, just remind them, let's just save this round. A lot of the times I've had a lot of luck, seriously, just asking people to stop and be like, hey, let's just save this. They'll sell their stuff and we'll save for next round. Don't be overconfident though. Trust me, forcing too often is really bad. And I saw this a lot in the mid ranks where people just think they're better than they are. Have confidence. I mean, that's great, but don't be overconfident. Don't be arrogant. Work with your team. Now is something that I've actually talked about in videos before a few times, and it's about overpeaking angles. And the reason that's such a bad mistake and such an easy mistake to fix is because what ends up happening, and I think that this is more prevalent the lower you go in the ranks, but it happens everywhere, is that people think they need to have their whole body out to be able to see the enemy. That's just not true. You just need just enough for you to be able to see around the corner, get that visual contact, and then get back around the corner. What ends up happening is a lot of people just sort of slide their whole body out, and then they think that they're going to take a look and then get quickly back behind cover. In a game like Valorant, with the sort of delay that comes from being shot, even though that's been changed so your movement speed isn't quite as affected, I should say, you're still probably going to die if you overpeak. My biggest tip here, and I've said it before, is to do what I call like a jump peek. So instead of doing jiggle peeks like in Counter-Strike, all I do is I jump at the corner and sort of arch my way out or arc my way out and then come right back in, all nice one motion. That's the easiest way I found to peek corners when I want to get back into cover. You may take a shot, but you're probably not going to die from it. A lot safer than exposing your whole body. Coming up next is a mistake that I think affects players probably the most in the mid ranks, and it's about not using your utility. A lot of times what you end up seeing is people ending rounds with full utility, particularly on losses as well. Depending on the agents they're playing, this makes more sense, and sometimes it doesn't. But for the most part, you should not be ending your rounds without using any of your utility. If you are, definitely take a look in the mirror. Try to figure out why that is. What I've seen the most is that people who tend to have a lot of utility left, so I'm talking about abilities, by the way. People who tend to not use their abilities are focusing too much on their sort of gun skill and not enough on their brain. So if you need to, figure out a strat with your team, start offering up some of the ways you can actually use your abilities. Because a lot of times people will be like, oh, let's just go in after the brimstone smokes, and they don't use anything. And I'm like, okay, but like you have things too, my Sage can throw slows. Phoenix can flash around corners. Like, even though we're smoking stuff, people can still use their abilities, you know what I mean? And I think this is something that happens a lot in the middle ranks, where everyone's like, all right, you use this, that's all we got to use for the round, let's go in, guys. And that's just not the case. You should never be ending rounds on full utility unless it was just an absolute stomp. So focus on trying to use those abilities more, and I think you're actually going to win a lot more than you realize. Have you ever tried to stay silent before and had your teammates give away your position? Well, that's the next mistake here. So don't ever run or jump when your team is trying to be silent. That is a really, really bad idea. Now, this happens a lot more at the very lowest ranks where people just don't quite understand how sound works, or how to move slowly and sort of, keep that competitive edge over the enemy team by staying silent. This is something that obviously, is fixed over time, but it's so important to understand that if you see your team walking somewhere, don't run up to them, just walk after them. You're not going to really help them if you run. You're only going to give away their positions. The higher you go in ranks, if you're still running at your teammates when they're trying to walk somewhere, you are actively losing your team rounds. I can promise you, even if no one tells you. The amount of times I've tried to stay silent on my approach to a bomb site just to have someone run right next to me or past me is just unbelievable, way too many times. So listen, if you see teammates walking, walk with them, don't run. Next up is something that I think happens a lot more towards the higher end of the ranks, and that's sort of holding the same angle as teammates, particularly on things like post plants, or maybe if you're defending. So what this means is that when you are in that sort of defensive mode, whether you're defending a bomb plant or a bomb site, what ends up happening is people kind of stack on top of each other and hold the same angle from very similar positions, or even on top of each other. What I always recommend is to complement your teammates' angles. So maybe if someone is watching like right side of mid on bind on defense, so they're watching a short area by cubby and by teleporter, they're more towards site, they're watching towards the right and towards the cubby. To complement that angle, you would want to play in U-Haul and watch more towards the left, and that way you're both watching that sort of walk up, but you're covering the different angles so that you're making a crossfire instead of both shooting from the same direction. Really, really important to learn how to do crossfires at higher ranks, because what ends up happening is when you're both fighting from the same sort of side or the same angle, the enemy team only has to look that way. You always want that element of surprise and that sort of uneasiness that comes with the enemy team not knowing which direction you're going to come from. Two angles is always better than one. Something I've talked about recently is another mistake we see all the time at all ranks, and that's peeking OPers dry. When you peek an OPer dry, it means you're essentially taking a one-on-one with an OPer without using any utility or any abilities, I should say, to break up their line of sight or their vision, whatever it may be. So things like smokes and flashes here would be what would make this a better idea. Now, the reason this is so bad is because right now in Valorant, ops are extremely powerful. There just isn't very many counters to them. So if you are playing against an OPer who is pretty good, you are just simply not going to really be winning these duels very often unless you can find a way to bait out a shot first, and then you can hold the angle for when they peek. Now, the easiest way to fix this position is to pay attention to the enemy's economy at all times. Check to see when they can afford ops. If they can afford ops, then pay a little more attention to the game and make sure you're being a little more careful on your next pushes or on your next peaks. It's something that obviously takes time to sort of pay attention to that level of the economy. For example, if they have 4,500, they can have an op on any player. So just, get used to looking at the economy before round start. It's going to help you in so many ways. It's kind of unbelievable how important it is. And lower ranked players tend not to do this very much, but at the higher ranks, it's pretty much all we're doing before round start. And finally, the last mistake I want to go over, one of the most common mistakes that you'll see at every single rank, is not committing to rushes. Now, rushes tend not to work super well in Valorant when compared to other games like Counter-Strike, and that's just because of how many abilities the defensive side can have that could prevent your rush. However, I think that it still applies that if your team is committing to a rush, you need to go with them. The only times it's okay not to go through with a rush is if you get mollied off before you can even get even close to the end of the molly. For example, the molly's in front of you, just never run through a molly. You're gonna lose all of your health, if not even die. So it's really important however, when your team is rushing, to go together, you know, to use your Sage Wall, I'm really, right now, in my head, I'm picturing B-side on split. You know, that rush there can work very well, but you have to go fast because the rotates are quick. So when your team is rushing, make sure you're going with them, make sure everyone's on the same page, make sure you're grouped up and someone, you know, calls that initial push, then and everyone follows. But, you know, leading up to a rush, it's also important to stay quiet, right? Because if they know it's coming, I mean, that could completely destroy the momentum you had. So really, really important to commit to a rush as a team. Make sure you're using all the utility you can, even if it's on a save round, to make this rush work. And guys, that is where we're going to end the video today. This was the most common mistakes at every rank and a few ways to fix them. Obviously, all these different mistakes can happen at all kinds of ranks. I just tried to generalize the best I could from what I've seen with my own experience. Obviously, the lowest ranked player I think I've ever played with was like, I think it was Plat. Maybe I played with a Gold 3 at one point. But in unrated, I've obviously played with a wide variety of players as well. So if you guys thought this was pretty good, or hey, maybe you think I missed something, leave a comment below. Let me know what sort of mistakes you're seeing at your ranks, and maybe we can brainstorm ways to fix them. With that being said, though, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and of course, subscribe. I don't want you guys to miss anything in the future. And with that being said, I will see you next time. Take it easy, and peace.